It's amazing every year when the college football season starts, you'll have that certain set players that everybody is talking about, especially in reference to the NFL draft and where they're going to go. And throughout the course of the college football season, thoughts change and the perspective changes in terms of who is really viewed as top prospects. And every year, I think you really see this when it comes to the quarterback position. You have one quarterback that really flew under the radar, and then all of a sudden, as the year progresses, people start to take notice. And then by the end of the season, this guy's being thought of as a top prospect when nobody really was doing that before the season had started. This year's candidate for that has to be Blake Bortles from Central Florida. I think it was the Penn State game that probably really put him on the map. It was probably his best game, in my opinion, of 2013. But that's the one that really, I think, started to get people to take notice of this guy and say, wow, he could potentially be an NFL franchise quarterback. And now, when I look at Blake Bortles, to me, he perhaps has the best physical set of tools of any quarterback available in this draft. It doesn't necessarily make him the best quarterback prospect. It just means on paper, on film, when you look at him, he maybe looks like he could be the best quarterback out of this draft class. But sometimes you have to look a little deeper. Now, in terms of some of the strengths that he has, first and foremost, I think that does jump out at you is his size. He's built like an outside linebacker. He's built like a tight end. He's 6'4", maybe 230, 235 pounds. Kind of really fits that Andrew Luck mold of today's prototype, kind of franchise quarterback, a guy with enough height to be able to see over the offensive and defensive line, to be able to see his throwing windows, to be able to throw over the offensive and defensive line, to get into those throwing windows, and big enough and strong enough and well built enough and proportionately enough to be able to absorb the physicality and the grind of a 16-game NFL season. He's an incredibly mobile and athletic quarterback. When you look at a guy that's 6'4", 235 pounds, you might not associate that level of athleticism with a guy like Bortles, but he has it. He shows a nice natural ability to move on his feet on the run as a thrower and as a runner, and is able with his size to be able to deliver, some force, if you will, on his runs. But he also shows some nice niftiness in the open field, some comfort level with being a runner, and some athleticism with being a runner. And a lot of teams are going to get away from the traditional kind of statuesque 6'5", 225-pound pocket passer. They're going to be gravitating towards the Blake Bortles type of quarterbacks. Now, he's also a guy to me, I think, even though I've seen some scouting reports that have dinged his mechanics quite a bit, I don't think his mechanics are as bad as many people let on. I think he does a good job of setting his feet in the pocket. I think he does a good job of squaring up and utilizing his entire body in his throwing motion better than a Manziel or a Bridgewater does. And I like his where he holds the ball, his ball position. He'll throw a nice tight spiral, which suggests to me he has really good hand position on the football. And I think he does a really good job of utilizing, like I said, his entire body throughout the throwing motion and following through better than a Manziel, or a Bridgewater does. Yeah, sometimes he has a bit of a windup when he's throwing on the move, and sometimes I don't like the ball position that he has when he's in the pocket, when he's moving around. The ball tends to sit a little low, making it a little bit of an easier target to be stripped out of there. But in general, I don't think his mechanics are quite as bad as many people say. I really don't. Now, some of the knocks I have on this kid are his decision making. I think he has a lot of work to do in that area. He's a guy that I've seen some of the throws that he made in 2013. I said, what the hell was he thinking? Why would he throw the ball into double or triple coverage? Why would he make that throw when he didn't necessarily need to? That was one of those things. I think his field vision, his ability to go through reads. Yeah, granted, in that UCF system, he threw a lot of those kind of dink and dunks, a lot of wide receiver screens, a lot of 5 to 10-yard passes. But he tended to me too much to lock onto one receiver and look at that target the entire time. There were moments where he showed an ability to go through progressions, but not nearly consistent enough for my liking. He didn't demonstrate nearly a good enough job to me on a consistent basis to be able to look off opposing, let's say, spying middle linebackers or safeties. He had a tendency a lot of times, even when he wasn't throwing the short passes, when he would be required to throw something further down the field, that he would sit there and tend to lock onto one guy and not really move defenses with his eyes. And that's something that I'm very big on. You got to be able to look off defenders. You can't give them any more avenue into seeing what you're going to do and where you're intending to go than you possibly have to. And that's something that Blake Bortles needs to improve upon. Also, as well, with his field vision, I think, again, he could do a better job of going through his progressions and not just settling for his first read and sticking to it. His arm strength is okay, but not elite. You would look at a guy that's 6'4", 235 pounds, and you would think maybe he should have a stronger arm than he does. He does have good arm strength in the short and intermediate, kind of the 5 to 15-yard range. But once you start going a little bit deeper than that, his deep outs, they float. They're up in the air for a long time. And when he does throw the ball down the field, it seems like he has to get a lot of air under the ball. And it kind of seems like that 40 to 50-yard window is the max that he can throw comfortably and do it with any type of accuracy at all. Now, another big weakness to me in his game is his accuracy. His accuracy, again, on the short kind of 5 to 10-yard passes is pretty solid. It better be, especially if you're being talked about as a potential #1 overall pick. But his accuracy at times is all over the place. He'll sit there and throw behind receivers. He'll throw it over receivers' heads. He'll throw it at their feet. He'll throw it way behind them where they had no chance to make the play at all. It's just like sometimes I don't know if that's a thing of a mechanical issue. I don't know if that's a decision-making issue or a field vision issue in terms of knowing when to throw the ball, or he just makes physical errors. But his accuracy, needless to say, is very, very erratic in my opinion. And, when you look at a guy that's 6'4", 235 pounds, that is a dual threat quarterback because he can move on his feet and he can throw well on the run. And that's something else that did impress me about him too, is his ability to throw on the run, both going to the right and to the left. Even with a little bit of the windup that he had when he was on the move, that's okay. He did demonstrate a good ability to square his feet, square his shoulders, and be able to make good, solid football throws. But when I look at a guy, and I want a guy to be my franchise NFL quarterback, I want a guy that's going to be able to look off opposing safeties. I want a guy that's going to be able to go through his progressions. I'm going to want a guy that can make the throws that are needed to be made and make accurate throws, because some of the throwing windows he had in college, he's not going to have in the NFL. They're going to be much smaller. And also at times it seems like he struggled to read zone coverages, seemed to be a bit confused by it. So when I went through my grading system, and again, all that information is in the description box down below, he technically graded higher than both Manziel and Bridgewater, and that to me is not incredibly surprising. You're going to hear a lot of buzz about this over the next 2.5 months or so, that Bortles will be grading higher than Manziel and Bridgewater from what they see on film in terms of the overall physical aspects. He graded out to me a total grade of a 71, whereas Bridgewater was a 70. And I wasn't surprised by that. I thought actually the gap was going to be a little bit higher than what it was. But when I look at Bortles, to me, he is far from a finished product. He's an example of he probably could have used another year in school, but based off of the way the board was situating and based off of his draft stock, he had to declare, and he made the right decision ultimately to declare. You're going to see a team take him in the top 10, probably the top 5, and maybe he'll even end up being the #1 overall pick to the Houston Texans. I'm not sure that he's the best quarterback in this draft class, though. I'm not. I personally like Bridgewater better, and when all is said and done, I might even take Manziel over Bortles. When I look at Bortles, I see a guy that looks the part, but he has some deficiencies in his game. And again, this is about placing an importance on what you value the most. So in the grading system overall, he might have graded higher, but I didn't grade things like intangibles and leadership and maturity and football intelligence. Things like that aren't part of my grading process. But I do put a lot of weight into things like field vision and accuracy and decision making. And those are areas that he's very lacking in. I feel like Teddy Bridgewater is the most NFL ready quarterback in this 2014 NFL draft. And I think Manziel might have more initial success than Bortles because Manziel has an ability to pull a rabbit out of his hat and keep plays alive longer than Bortles does. I think Manziel's decision-making is a little better. I think his accuracy is a little bit better. I think his field vision is definitely a lot better than Blake Bortles. Bortles has the look, and he could potentially end up being worth the #1 overall pick. He could end up being a franchise quarterback in the National Football League. but he also, to me, at times looks like he could be a big time bust and really disappoint some people. Again, it's about what you value. I value decision making and accuracy and field vision, and he doesn't have a lot of that. He's going to have to work on that. In terms of an NFL comparison, at one point in time I was going to say Blaine Gabbert, but I'm like, nah, I won't saddle anybody with that. I don't think that's fair. I look at him and I see somebody like a little bit bigger version maybe of a Jake Locker. Because another thing that frustrates me about Bortles is he has those moments where he runs very, very hot. But he also has those moments where he runs very, very cold. He has those times where he makes those big time NFL throws, and he has those other times where you're like, what the hell did you see there? What the hell was that throw? Just like Jake Locker. Now, I think he's going to be a more durable quarterback at the NFL level than Jake Locker, but a lot of the physical comparisons in terms of being a dual threat quarterback, having a good arm, but not a great elite NFL arm in terms of arm strength and accuracy, and his ability to keep plays alive with his feet and gain yards with his feet, reminds me an awful lot of Jake Locker. So, as I said, Blake Bortles, on the surface, there's a lot to like. And from a physical standpoint, he is going to probably grade out the best of any quarterback in the 2014 NFL draft. However, to me, that doesn't mean that he's the best quarterback prospect in this draft, even if my grading scale would technically suggest that. I think that I would rather have Bridgewater and maybe even Manziel over Blake Bortles at this point in time.